Hi, my name is Katie Houchin, and I'll be presenting on parenthood and children. So to start off, I'd like to talk about deciding to be a parent. Some things to consider before becoming a parent are social pressures, value of children, cost of children, religious beliefs, and the effect on the couple. I'd like to continue with social pressure. There is a term called prenatalist bias, and this is the belief that everyone should reproduce and having kids is expected and is a social norm. This can happen by even some young couples' parents or even the society to put this pressure on them that they should have children at a certain age, or they should be getting to, once they get into a relationship, that they should have children soon after. The next is the value of children, and this is the idea that children bring excitement and uniqueness to a marriage and family, which they do. It's very exciting to have children and to build a family, but couples need to really think about the seriousness it is of bringing a child into the world and raising them into adulthood. The next is the cost of children. A lot of times I think people underestimate how expensive it is to have children, and a lot of times parents will end up compromising the income growth and investment to raise their children, and don't really understand and really realize how important and how expensive it is to bring a child into this world. Next is religious beliefs. This was something that I thought was extremely important. This is a decision of how a child is going to be raised based on the parents' beliefs. I think a lot of times couples will get together and they will have separate beliefs, and they'll think that it won't be a huge deal, but when it comes down to starting a family and raising their children, they will need to figure out what they believe and how they are going to raise their child based on what they think is morally correct. And lastly, the effect on the couple, the decrease in happiness and satisfaction within the marriage. And this is something that a lot of young couples also worry about, that there will be a decrease in intimacy and love and fulfillment within their marriage due to children taking up all of their time, which is something to think about, and they should really take seriously before deciding to have a child. Next is the change in parenting trends. Some of these include postponing parenthood, early and late parenthood, one-child families, non-marital births, and multi-partner fertility. So we'll go ahead and talk about a little bit about the postponing parenthood. Now, this is the change in later age of marriage, desired education completion before having children. And this is just because of the day and age in that we live in, this 21st century, where a lot of young adults come out of high school and they feel the need to go and get their education out of the way, as well as building a career and becoming stable before starting a relationship or even thinking about kids. And due to this, they will start with relationships later in age, as well as getting married and then later having children. I'd like to also talk a little bit more about the early and late parenthood. We'll go ahead and start with early parenthood. There are some disadvantages and advantages to both. With early parenthood, couples often lack maturity and a slow start to careers. There are some advantages with early parenthood because when you are younger, you do have the ability to have your parents around and have them help you raise your child. And then also later on, through the years, once your child is raised, you have more freedom because you had them at such a young age. Some disadvantages I want to talk about, which I found was interesting from this article. Lee states, we showed that early childbearing plays a critical role in the association between childhood disadvantage and onset of heart problems for women, as well as we found that early transition to parenthood has long-term effects on various life course risk factors. And so they found that with early parenthood, a lot of times those parents will put their education and their career aside, which will often leave them unhappy, and so leading to unhappiness and depression, even more psychological disorders that tend to happen throughout that lifespan, and somewhere in between the midlife crisis, leading to obesity and more health issues, which can lead to higher risk of things in the future. Next is the late parenthood. So parents tend to have more confidence about their abilities in raising a family and managing a household as well as a career. Late parenthood also leads to children having more emotional and financial stability. And this is because late parents tend to go to college, get an education, start their career, and with doing this, they are much more financially stable, they are more confident in who they are because they had time to mature, and they feel much more comfortable and confident that they have strong abilities in being able to raise a family and be able to manage a household very well. Next is one-child families, and this is just an increase in career opportunities and cost of raising a child in today's world. A lot of times, by the time that we have the late parents getting to parenthood, they're in their 30s to 40s, and so a lot of times, because of the career opportunities, they wait too long maybe, to have a child, and so they don't end up having another kid, or just because of how expensive it is to raise a child in today's society, they decide, one child is just the best for them. And we'll continue on with non-marital births. And this is due to the growth in cohabitation compared to marriage, as well as single mothering by choice and teenage pregnancy. And this is just because in the 21st century, we are not having as many people commit to a marriage, and they're wanting just to cohabitate. And we're having more parents, or more mothers more specifically, who choose to be a single mother because they spent so much time on their career. They don't really want to spend time with a relationship and would just like to have their own child to raise. And lastly, the multi-partner fertility. And this is just the increase in divorce and non-marital couples leading to multiple births from different partners due to the high rate of breakups. Because in these relationships, especially non-marital couples, there is no commitment there, and so a lot of times we see these couples getting together, having a child, but then ended up breaking up and people moving on, and so they end up having multiple births from different partners. Next, I'd like to talk about the 21st century parenting and the advantages and disadvantages. So some of the advantages are parents have higher levels of education and more knowledge about raising children. Which is what we talked about earlier, how the late parenthood leads to parents feeling more secure in who they are, and they have higher levels of education, so they have much more knowledge about raising their children, as well as being more emotionally involved compared to generations in the past. Another advantage is the access to the internet, which provides more information for parents in a crisis or situation, and more ways to communicate with others by means of social media. Now, these are all new and exciting things. We have so much information, so many sources that we can reach out to help us in a time of need, or if we're just wondering what's the best for our child when it comes to, what fruit is the best to eat and things like that. Those are really great sources to have, but then it also leads into some of the disadvantages. And so disadvantages include parenting role conflicts with work while maintaining household and family responsibilities. So although we live in the 21st century where we have both the mother and father involved in a career, building a career and trying to maintain a house and build a family and have a social life, it can become extremely overwhelming and tend to have those conflicts and become extremely overwhelmed with stress when trying to balance all of those things. And then the other is too much access to other sources of advice and influence. And this is something that I thought was interesting. Bogan 2004 states parents must be cognizant of and responsive to external influences that have immediate and long-term impact on child's development. This is just something that I think is a little bit of a disadvantage when it comes to the internet and social media and all these sources that we can reach out to. Sometimes those influences and those advice blogs, things that we're looking at, don't coincide with our own personal education or beliefs and can influence the way that we think. And lastly, the unlimited amount of access to the internet and social media. Like I said, he also states parents routinely complete standard tasks in an increasingly computerized and automated environment, and thereby repeatedly experience episodes of interpersonal isolation. So because of this, because of social media and all the access to internet, we are losing the interpersonal connections with our children and with people around us. And it's something just to remind us that parents need to be very cognizant about that with try not to have those isolations. And these are my references. Thank you so much for listening.